Scott,
we've got Jason and we've got Scott in the meeting.
okay, so which member wishes to present the report? And then there might be...
Sorry, convener. I think Jason's on mute. Yeah, I'll present the report, and then myself and Jason will be open to take any questions at the end of it. So if I can firstly refer you to the performance highlights page of our report, which is page 21 of your report pack. This sets out the key successes and challenges during Q2, which we're asking the committee to note. As per normal arrangements, I'll run through these performance highlights, and following that, as I say, happy to answer any questions related to any area of the report. Yeah, I've just, and apologies from Jason, I think he's trying to reboot, he's having problems. So referring to bullet point 1 and 2, there's been a further decrease in the number of accidental dwelling fires during Q2. This has been the case now over a prolonged period of time, and our target of 78 for 2023 is on target. Again, incidents are mostly commonly involving cooking and combustible materials being left too close to the heat source. However, casualties do remain low, which is good to see. As members will know, we do have good referral pathways in place to target those most vulnerable in our communities from protection from fire and other harm. And again, this is evidenced in Appendix 1 of your report, which covers the good work being carried out by our teams in this area. Also, we've got I'd like to highlight Appendix 2, which also details some of the other fantastic work that our stations are carrying out with partners and delivering the services to communities, and at times going above and beyond. And I would just like to take the opportunity to thank our crews across the Angus area for the work that they are putting in this regard. Moving on to bullet point 3, where we've only experienced 3 non-domestic building fires during Q2 in relevant premises, which is again below average. These types of fires continue to be very low within Angus, and the fire safety management arrangements within non-domestic buildings are generally of a very good standard. On to bullet point 4, I've highlighted the below average number of road traffic collisions during the quarter. There were no fatal casualties and 5 non-fatal casualties showing varying levels of injuries. I'd also like to provide a little bit more context around other special services we are increasingly involved in surrounding Priority 3, away from RTCs. This involved 60 special services in Q2, over half of which were effecting entry and assisting other agencies, predominantly where there was concern for occupiers of properties. The remainder made up of being a first responder, flooding, hazardous materials, attempts, suicide attempts, and other types of rescues that we're involved in. At bullet point 5, I've highlighted that unwanted fire alarm signal incidents were above average during Q2, and unfortunately and disappointingly, this is starting to show as a trend, and it now leads us to think that the sustained reduction, as we previously thought, was down to the pandemic. As a service, we are keen to reduce our attendance at these incidents, to reduce the road risk and maximise the time this wastes for other types of work, and the committee are aware of the upcoming changes surrounding this that the SFRS are going through into next year. Moving on to bullet point 6, again, I've highlighted the large increase in deliberate primary fires and secondary fires over the quarter. And in addition to Q1 of this year, it's disappointing to see, and we will have difficulty achieving our targets going forward this year. We continue to do a lot of work with our partners to reduce deliberate fire setting and antisocial behaviour, and we will continue with this. We've been reintroducing our fire skills programmes for youths, and Safe Angus has started again across the whole area, across the schools. And finally, the final 2 bullet points, we continue to risk assess the premises that are high risk to our crews and continually training for all areas of their work. And there's been a number of training exercises this quarter involving multi-agency partners. And again, just mention some of the work that you'll see again in Appendix 2 that details some of the fantastic work that's going on with those most vulnerable within the communities. Thanks for listening, and now happy to accept any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Scott. The unwanted fire alarm signals, where do they come from? normally? Is it a specific area, sheltered housing, or?
No, so we've got no trains currently showing. We've got our usual high offenders, which are, as you mentioned there, care homes and the education department. So we did agree on a previous scrutiny board last year to go around all our education sector across Angus and carry out audits, which we're currently still in the process of doing, just to try and put things in place. We do continue as we go out to these incidents to make recommendations to responsible persons in regard to this, to try and offer advice on how to reduce occurrences of these. But there's no specific premises that we've got concerns with that are showing multiple repeat offences. It seems to be an even spread across the area. So it's just educating and offering advice, and that's the approach that we're taking. Other than what we're moving forward with the call challenging going into later on in the next year.
It's obviously demand led for you, isn't it? You don't know when you're going to get a call like that and whether it's going to be serious or not. So you have to attend.
No, yeah. So at the moment we'll have to attend. So as part of the options that were put to partners and that were proposed last year, we got our preferred option, which is based around call challenging in all non-domestic premises. And if there's no fire confirmed, then we wouldn't respond, thus reducing the road risk and releasing a large amount of time to concentrate on other areas of our work. There's some exemptions with this around hospitals and sleeping risks, and we were looking to implement this around about April 2023, but that date's still to be confirmed.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. Councillor Beattie, a question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Convener. Scott, you mentioned in your report on page 31 that 7 of the fires were at Rossi Secure Unit. Could you give us a wee bit more information about that? And can you tell us if you carry out any of your outreach initiatives at Rossi?
Thanks, Councillor Beattie. Yeah, that's actually been because we've just finished our second programme of work in Rossi. So yes, predominantly it involves the deliberate fire setting in the Rossi Secure Unit. So we initiated a pilot programme last year with Rossi, in partnership with Rossi and other partners, to try and engage with the young offenders that are in the unit and bring them through a programme of work to try and build some teamwork and to try and show the consequences potentially of fire raising and antisocial behaviour. And we set this up as a practical week-long event with a group from the unit and brought them in, and it was very successful in that from the start they were very disengaged and there wasn't really much interest, to at the end of the programme carrying out a full emergency exercise where they were rescuing casualties, working in smoke and darkness, carrying out teamwork and all that sort of thing. And it was really deemed quite a success. And with the staff at Rossi noticed a big difference in the attitude and the behaviours of those that were involved. So we've continued to work with Rossi, and again we've just ran the second programme, just finished last week, and graduated another group. We've got another one programmed in for early next year for a new group to get involved in that. So we do that, and obviously as part of our fire safety engagement activities, our auditing officers also attend Rossi to provide information on the legislative side of things and any measures that we can put in place to try and reduce occurrences of fire within the unit. So we are trying to do as much as we can, Councillor Beattie.
That's great. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thank you both. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. Well, as usual, your partnership working is pretty early, but I was just wanting to ask you a question on page 34 to do with Safe Angus. It's great to see this up and running because Safe Angus was missed, really, but this is great to see. One of the increasingly risky activities for young people is vaping. And I've been around quite a lot of schools recently, and head teachers are extremely worried about this. It's going down to about primary 5 level, which is a real concern. So I was wondering if this is going to be tackled at all, you know, in your discussions, obviously, with your partners. Do you think that could be taken on board in some kind of a way?
So thanks again for your comments, Councillor Devine, and you recognising the work that the crews are getting involved in across the area. In regard to the Safe Angus, so this is obviously the first time that we've managed to get it back up and running since the pandemic, and even on this occasion, it's predominantly been a virtual event. So it's mostly been virtually, whereas previously we set it up as an interactive event with partners coming in and all primary 5 pupils as part of their curriculum going through the Safe Angus, and really just teaching a lot of life skills. So I've not been involved as an individual personally in this one, this one that we've just carried out, and I've not seen the feedback reports from it. And specifically to vaping, I'm doubtful but unsure as well whether that was involved in any way, shape or form within the inputs. I may ask police colleagues who may have been involved in part of it to comment on that further on in their report, but I'm not aware of it. What I can do though, Councillor Devine, is I can check up with our community action team and find out if it's something that we can include in the curriculum and in the Safe Angus programme going forward, and see if there's some input we can give into it.
That would be great. I know it's been taken on by a variety of Public Health Scotland, Public Health Tayside, but I think it just has to come at all angles for these young people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor Bell, question?
Thank you, convener. And yes, Scott, thank you. I particularly wanted to pick out a wee section on page 35 around the work that has been done around backwater and Lintraith and around water safety. And first of all, to thank Gary Woods and his colleagues for being so ready to support that activity and to lead on it, actually, and to feedback thanks from the Community Council in that area, Kerry Landward West. My question is around ongoing support for that. I think the risks there are becoming less seasonal. You know, it's more of an all year round thing. And I was wondering when they might be able to repeat it, maybe getting into slightly busier times in sort of late spring. Might this be something that could be done again, maybe a couple of times? Because it is a big concern in the community, and I think it really needs that feet on the ground approach across the partnership, not just the water safety, but the fire. You know, the fire, wildfires getting out of hand is a big issue around that area, and I think it's a really valuable piece of work. It would be great to be able to go back to that community council and say that yes, you're going to be able to help out to some extent next year. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks again.
Really appreciate it.
No, thank you, and thanks again for your comments. It has, as we know, been very well received, and I know it's been quite close to your heart over the last couple of years with the activity that we've had around those areas, and some of the antisocial behaviour, and we know how much that affects the local communities in that area and the tourists in that, and the tourists that regularly attend that area. So yeah, certainly it's something that we would intend definitely that we'll have got planned in year on year, just leading up to the better weather. But if it's something that you think would be beneficial, perhaps twice a year, and do a further one later on into the summer as we maybe even come towards the end of the better weather, or so-called better weather, then it's certainly something that I could ask of the teams. And now that we've got that partnership built and we've done it once, I mean, it's quite simple to put it in place and do some of the work around that area. So yeah, no problem at all, and I'll take that on board.
Happy with that, Councillor Bell?
Yeah, but I wasn't needing to come back in to save time, but thank you. Yes, very much so, Scott. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Proctor.
Thank you very much, Convener. Scott, the two previous councillors, Councillor Devine and Councillor Bell, kind of took my questions and beat me to the gun on the old hand, but I'd just like to reiterate what they've said about the activities on page 34 and 35 on the report, and a second activity up at Wintrathen would be very welcome. My other question was about flooding. You mentioned it briefly, and the recent weekend where we had the flooding. I know that you were involved in an activity I was involved in out at Justin Hall, but how heavily were the Fire and Rescue Service tasked out of that weekend? Because I think you must have been meeting yourselves coming off.
Yeah, so I've not seen the figures published yet for the Friday right through the Saturday. It was obviously a very busy time, and the calls I know in control at the time we'd set up an incident support room. I know the local resilience partnership had stood up and were stacking what we call stacking calls. As you get so many calls, we were stacking calls and sending officers and people out to assess sites to find out what the best resource would be to affect some kind of response to those incidents. As we know with a lot of flooding incidents, some of the issues that we do have, and a couple I attended myself around Old Allen and the surrounding area in particular. The fact is, if we'd sent a resource there, the water probably would have been coming in quicker than it was actually going out. It was absolutely spate conditions, and it's something that we're probably we'll have seen, and we probably will see more regularly in the coming years. So safe to say that the way we deal with those types of incidents, any type of risk to the public or life risk, take priority over just domestic type flooding incidents, and that's kind of the way that we stack those calls and deal with them in a priority order, if you like, Councillor Proctor. So yeah, I'm not 100% on the exact information around the Justin Hall ones, because I've not seen the reports come back on that yet. But if there was any further information you were wanting on it, I'm sure I could provide that at a later date. And I'm not sure if Jason's working yet, if he's managed to get there, if he's got any further information on that, then the incidents that weekend in the local area.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Scott. Yeah, I'm fully aware of, and thank you for that, and thank you and your team for all that you did on that particular by weekend. And I'd just like to reiterate, another event up at Wintrathen would be actually well received by all. Thank you.
Jason, do you want to add? I know you've got your mic on now. Or off.
Thanks, Convener, and apologies to the Convener and Committee for my IT.
No, not at all.
Deciding to have a restart there. I've been online earlier chatting this through with Scott and our approach, so it's not a really good way to start off with all. The only thing I had to add on the operational activity, like Scott, I don't have the finite detail on it. However, just a further piece of information, we were bringing resources all over Scotland to support the Angus area, including the water rescue teams from the east and west service delivery areas. So just to make sure we had a resilient response up here. Convener, would it be okay to say a few words, conscious that Scott's provided information on the scrutiny report?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. On you go. No.
Thanks. Just to give yourself and the committee a wee bit of background to the changes that's happened within the management structure within Perth, Kinross, Angus and Dundee. I've been appointed as the permanent local senior officer for the area. At the last scrutiny meeting, it would have been Scott that delivered that as the temporary local senior officer. He's now, as you know, the group commander in charge for Angus on my behalf. Previous local senior officer, Stephen Wood's been promoted to the Deputy Assistant Chief Officer for the North Service Delivery Area. So Stephen's been promoted up one. I've come in to backfill him, and Scott's still here to support the the Angus Scrutiny Committee. Conscious it's my first scrutiny meeting with you. Apologies again for the ICT issues I had. As you've been talking through, it's an awful lot of work being done regarding addressing the performance matters that Scott talks through in Appendix 1 and 2. And there's been a lot of operational activities that will, as Scott was alluding to, will give further detail in the next scrutiny report. Quite notable for ourselves is on page 20, we've got we refer to our local fire and rescue plan, which was approved in 2020, just to make the committee aware that we are actually in the process of reviewing this plan. And what we're really looking to do is make it more bespoke and current to the area, which will enable us to include some of the matters that were discussed within Appendix 2 by the committee. I've not got anything further to add because I think Scott's kind of answered all the questions, convener, if that's okay with yourself.
Absolutely, Jason. Thank you very much, and thank you, Scott, as well. And I think there's been a lot of questions. I would just like to make a comment before we go to comments, just to thank you guys for what you did during the flooding time, what you did during the storms that we had at the start of the year, and the community work that you do. I read it regularly in the local press, and several of your stations do an absolutely excellent job for the local community. So keep up the good work, guys. We're proud of you all, and we need you. And take that back to your colleagues, if you will.
Thanks, convener.
Is there any other comments? No. Well, there's just one recommendation. The Scrutiny Audit Committee are invited to note and comment on it. Do we note the report? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Now it's Police Scotland, agenda item number 5, and I think it'll be Leanne. Are you speaking to this report?
Convener, I'll maybe jump in. It's Phil Davison here.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll quickly
Apologies,
pass on
Phil.
to Leanne.
Apologies, I wasn't sure who was. No, on you go. That's fine.
No problem. Thank you, and I guess good afternoon, everybody. We've got 2 papers today. So in terms of the first one, which is our quarterly report, Leanne and I here as always, and clearly available to take questions from you shortly. The report that is presented is the Q2 reporting period, 1st of July until the 30th of September. However, as always, it does focus on the year to date and against the comparable periods from the previous years. As per previous quarters, I would say to members that the impact of the pandemic continues to make year-on-year comparisons challenging, and that remains due to the varying levels of restrictions we've clearly seen over the past couple of years. But we clearly can give some context to any questions that may come up. I do trust that members have had the chance to read the report as always, and we wouldn't intend to go over the full submission in opening, but I will pass to Leanne just now, who will draw out some of the key highlights for you before we then take some questions. Thanks very much.
No problem at all. That's fine. Thank you, Phil. Leanne?
Thank you, convener. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all well. I'll now go over some of the highlights of the Q2 report, which I'm sure, as the Chief Superintendent said, you will have all read by now. So violent crime continues to be a priority for us in Angus, with a particular focus on domestic violence. Although there's a slight increase in the number of serious and common assaults which have been reported this year, there's been a welcome reduction in the number of emergency service assaults and robberies. There's been no particular trend or series identified regarding the common assaults and serious assaults, with a large number of those involving people who are known to each other. Our colleagues in CID review all serious crime, including serious assaults, to ensure that all our investigative opportunities are maximised. There's been a reduction that have been recorded in comparison to last year and the 5-year average. Throughout the summer months, we've worked well with our partners to prevent and respond to antisocial behaviour, with our primary focus always being on prevention and early intervention. Moving on, a very welcome decrease in the number of housebreakings to dwellings, with an increase in the detection rate. The number of frauds recorded have increased, which is in comparison to last year and the 5-year average, again in keeping with the divisional and national picture. An increase in online offending, following on from the lockdown period continues to account for this increase. We continue to focus on prevention and awareness messaging, ensuring that this is shared with our partners and communities in order to prevent these crimes, whilst carrying out the complex and protracted investigations of those which have been reported. Moving on to road safety, there were no fatalities in Angus during this reporting quarter, and there was an overall reduction in a number of people seriously injured on the roads. There's been a decrease in the number of people who have been reported for speeding and drug driving offences. However, despite this, we'll continue to focus on this and work with our colleagues in road policing to share media prevention messaging regarding this type of offending and road safety locally, particularly going into the festive period. Moving on to public protection, there's an increase in the number of recorded sexual crime this year in comparison to last year. Many of these offences have occurred out with the reporting period and are classed as non-recent in nature. In a number of cases, multiple reports are raised in respect of one individual victim following disclosure of multiple incidents over a period of time. In the majority of these reports, there's a domestic aggravator, with the victim and offender having been in a relationship at the time of or prior to the offending. Our local and specialist officers take time to speak to victims, allowing them to have trust and confidence in us to continue to report such crime. Domestic abuse continues to be a priority for policing in Angus, with priority being given to tracing and arresting offenders, whilst victims are supported by the local domestic abuse liaison officers and our partners. Moving on to the key activity section, there have been 24 incidents recorded at the non-fatal overdose group this reporting period, with supports being offered to these individuals. There have been 1,647 vulnerable persons reports submitted by officers in Angus during this reporting period, relating to various concern types such as adult concern, child concern and domestic abuse. Once screened by the Risk and Concern Hub, these reports are shared appropriately with partners so that the right help and support can be offered to the right people. In this reporting quarter, officers in Angus have dealt with 62 missing person inquiries. You will see an additional section in relation to the work carried out by our mountain rescue team, including deployments and awareness raising sessions, again an important area of policing that often goes unseen. Over this past quarter, we've continued to increase our community engagement work in Angus, with numerous visits to education settings, including Safe Angus and other community events. This will continue to be a focus for our local community policing teams going forward. And if anyone has any questions for myself or Chief Superintendent Davison, then we'll happily answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Dorn.
Hi, thank you very much for that. I had a couple of questions on that. First one was on the domestic abuse rates that you mentioned. I noticed that the rates have largely been static in Angus, and they sit higher than the Scotland average, and you mentioned it's an area of priority. It's also the part of the 16 days of activism on gender-based violence at the minute, and I wondered if there are going to be any changes in the approaches to any reduction or support for reduction of offences in this area going forward.
Thanks, Councillor. Really good question. Domestic abuse is a real priority for us. I think it's a priority across the multi-agencies. The harm that is caused in domestic abuse settings, whether that be of a violent nature or of a sexual nature, and whether that be built up over a long range of time or very, very much sporadic, is of absolute focus for us. And I think, you know, what 16 days does, it's one part of a number of approaches that we have to look to tackle domestic abuse. So we probably look along the lines of firstly what we can do to educate and awareness raise, and very much the campaign like 16 days, like Police Scotland's That Guy campaign, very much in the space of trying to influence predominantly males to reflect on their behaviour and change their behaviour and have their behaviour challenged. So there's that bit in educate and awareness raise. There's the support aspect. So that policing work with multiple partners from the local authority and into the third sector to provide support for those that are subject of domestic abuse to, either work towards escaping from an abusive relationship or post having reported, to have support through the criminal justice processes that ultimately follow. We then clearly have our prevention activities. So the new domestic abuse disclosure scheme has been really helpful to us in identifying repeat offenders, being able to target offenders in a very proactive way, looking at work around about bail conditions and others in a very proactive policing way to minimise harm. And I think that as well, beyond that is then enforcement. So it's that absolute assurance from us that because it is a priority, each and every allegation that comes into us is investigated thoroughly by specialist teams and is given that focus. So our hope is that we want to see a reduction, clearly, in offences, but equally, we're also trying to increase confidence in reporting. So you get a bit of both ends there, because I still suspect that there is an element of underreporting because of fear and intimidation. So we've probably got a bit of a way to go, and it's through that four-pronged approach that I think we'll get there in partnership. I hope that helps answer that question for you.
Yeah, thank you. I would have presumed as well that this would be an underreporting of the total incidents that are actually happening. So thank you for running through that. I did have an additional question, if I can still ask that, if that's okay. It was on a slightly different topic, which is relating to the reduction in speeding offences that's noted. I just wanted to check, has there been any difference in the amount of monitoring that's been taking place between 21 and 20, the previous year and this quarter? Just because the amount of contact I have from people about speeding, particularly in the Montefieth and Sidlaw ward, is massive. I get a lot of contact about speeding in that area, and that has increased over the past kind of few months. So it was just a question around monitoring and versus previous year, because the reduction is so stark. But what I'm hearing from people is that they're seeing more people speeding. And kind of following that, would more speeding kind of interventions on roads help address kind of demand in that area as well?
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. Really good question. Clearly, road safety is the primary focus here. And we want to be reducing serious injuries across our roads. So all of the activities that we have is with that very much in mind. In terms of campaigns, we've been running through our campaigns as we normally do. The number of speed deployments and areas of focus remain at a high level, as they have done in previous years, both by our roads policing officers and locally. And clearly that has had, I think, some effect this year with the reductions in speeding offences that you see. Within the report, you'll see, for example, as well, that the number of vehicles stopped across Tayside has increased on last year. So I think our visible presence on the roads hasn't waned, is probably the way to explain it, but the behaviour of drivers has, and that's reflected in, I'd like to think, the reductions in serious injury and deaths that we've had on the roads, which is really important. In terms of your latter part of the question around about any further activity, I don't think there can ever be enough, is the reality. I think the more activities we can get, the more we will continue to educate drivers on the road and deter behaviour that's dangerous. If I was asked to put a specific point on why maybe such a stark reduction on last year, and this is possibly reflects back to that bit around about COVID, what we had last summer was essentially restrictions opening up for the first time, but flights external to the country maybe weren't as prevalent. So what I do know is that there was a significant number of visitors into the area. We always have heavy visitors into the area. We know that Angus and Tayside's popular, but I suspect that there was an increased number of people that were unfamiliar with our roads in the previous year, which may account for some of the reduction as well. If that's helped.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the 16 days of activism for violence against women as well, and partly to reassure Councillor Doran that this is an area that I know the police have had a huge focus on over the last 5 years, that they'll be fed up of me raising it, I'm sure. But it is important, and you do take it really seriously. I wanted to pick up on, the domestic abuse has stayed the same, and I just heard at lunchtime that nationally there's been a 1% decrease, so we're static. And in terms of the rate unattempted rapes, we're seeing a 57% increase over a 5-year average. That's concerning. There's historic data in there, but that in Angus, our rate per 10,000 people is higher than Dundee and Perth and Kinross. And I just wondered, and this is a very subjective question, I do apologise for putting you on the spot, but what is it about the situation in Angus that, presents this as such a problem? The Don't Be That Guy campaign is really good, and I would love to see more of our Angus social media pages sharing that, if that's possible, over the next few days particularly. But is there a particular issue around toxic masculinity in Angus that is the reason that these figures are actually really quite depressing, that, despite all the campaigns that we've been running, we don't seem to be making massive inroads into behaviour change and to build better, healthier relationships that, people can talk about their issues rather than resort to violence of some sort. So, yeah, I would appreciate your opinion on that, your professional opinion based on what you're seeing in the field. Thank you.
Councillor, listen, I'm always happy to talk about domestic abuse. Our support in this area is huge, and I'm grateful for your support in particular into this area. It is a challenging one to probably try and get into the depths to explain, and it kind of goes back a little bit to what I said to Councillor Doran there, around about, on the one hand, we are really trying hard to encourage reporting, and we've seen significant successes in that regard. And I think particularly in Angus, where the relationships we enjoy with third-party reporting centres and our voluntary sector and with Angus Council is really, really positive. But equally, if we then do get increased historical reporting and people coming forward, that has a knock-on impact on figures, as clearly we know. There's been changes in terms of legislation over the last little bit. So the disclosure scheme, I think, has helped, and what that does is brings other offences to the fore as well. And clearly, I get the concern that we are sitting in terms of rate per 10,000 with a high level comparatively, and it's something that I'm keen to have a close monitoring on. But I think because of the complexity of trying to get to that balance between, is this actually a positive on the basis of the success that we're having in our communities in terms of increased reporting, or is it an absolute profile offender challenge? What I would say in terms of some of the digging into that, and Leanne, I don't know if you've significant experience in the backdrop of public protection work, is we do find that we have a number of repeat offenders. And I think when you look at the volume of repeat offenders, there are those that are in every area, but we've a fair profile of repeat offenders in Angus that will account for a reasonable proportion and percentage of crimes. So there's a whole host of factors. I guess, that play with it. And I'm sorry I can't give you a single direct straight answer to that, but hopefully that helps, just a bit of context. And I don't know if Leanne wants to come in just on the back of that too.
I think it's been covered, really, Chief Super, but no, I do that. We're certainly very proactive in Angus, and we've got good relationships. And the domestic abuse liaison officers being based in Angus and now solely focused on Angus community and Angus victims has undoubtedly seen an increase in reporting, which I welcome, because I would rather know about it when it's happening. And it's about building that trust, and the proactive, going back and speaking to various partners, etc. The proactive approaches that we use sometimes bring the increase in the incidents being reported with that.
Is that okay, Councillor Bell? Do you want a supplementary?
No, it's okay. I mean, I really appreciate the partnership working that goes on in this field across Angus. That is definitely the way to go. I guess, like everyone, I'm frustrated that we're not making deeper inroads into stopping it happening in the first place, which is where I would very much want to be. I think that's a long road ahead, but every one of us in this meeting has a role in that, and for 16 days of activism, I really just want to highlight that and to ask everyone in this committee to challenge gender-based violence and abuse if they come across it. So attitudes, jokes, whatever, it's a serious issue, and we all have a role in fixing it. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Councillor Bell, I'll maybe just jump back in there quickly and say I fully support that collective effort. It's been actually a bit overwhelming, the amount of responses we've had to the That Guy campaign and to the collective effort on 16 days. So I think the more we can raise awareness of this, we'll probably see a bit of an increase in figures for a while, but I'm okay with that. As Leanne said, it's for the greater, longer good.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you very much. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, convener. Phil and Leanne, I'd like to thank you for this report and the continued work that you and your officers do to keep Angus safe. I thank you and applaud you for that. My question, I'm not sure whether you'll be able to answer it or not, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Throughout the report and the appendices in this report and previous reports, the one thing that has stood out to me that is not in the report are how many officers we physically have. Now, as that's perhaps sensitive with it being operational, again, that's why I'm not sure whether you're able to answer it or not. And if not, then perhaps a ratio of the population to the officers ratio and how that compares to other areas within Scotland. And the reason that I ask is because obviously Angus being such a rural county, if officers are called to a rural incident, whether it's theft from a farm or something that's in progress up there, then how is that going to then affect response times to get everywhere else? So do we have enough officers within Angus to cover the whole rurality of the county?
Councillor Gregg, listen, thanks very much for the question. I unfortunately can't answer the question directly, I think, as you probably hinted at there, but what I can tell you, and hopefully this will be able to help both to give you a bit of information, an explanation as to why I can't tell you directly, and then some assurance. So Tayside Division itself has an allocation of 891 police officers, and on top of that, it will have a number of police staff that operate within it. Now that allocation is spread across our 3 local authorities, predominantly into response and community policing roles, but they also operate on local public protection, local partnerships and local crime investigation matters. But it's complex in terms of resourcing because we're also supported as a division by our national resources who operate locally. So we've got major investigation teams, specialist crime division officers, operational support division officers, roads policing officers who all also operate from locations within Tayside and across each of the 3 local authority areas, and also that we're supported by special constable volunteers as well. In policing terms, we routinely prioritise and flex our resources to ensure that we get the highest vulnerabilities addressed. The reason why I can't give a further breakdown in terms of number is that where our resources are deployed, that sort of information can lead to operational policing compromise, and that would be because the further you break it down, the greater insight it has to those that may be intent on committing crime or causing disorder, allow them to gauge the likelihood of detection or how to take measures to negate it by potentially engaging or occupying police resources in a certain area in a certain way to maximise their efforts or chances of committing crime in another area. So I wouldn't go into the specific details for that specific reason. But what I can give in terms of assurance is across the country, we've got 17,234 police officers, and they are allocated across 13 policing divisions, local policing divisions, and our national policing support functions. The spread and where the allocation of those officers are deployed to is regularly reviewed in terms of national demand, regional demand, local demand, and we look to do that on the basis of ensuring that we've got the right amount of resources in the right areas at the right times. Sometimes it might not feel like that, because undoubtedly, like any emergency service, you have peaks and troughs in demand. But broadly, we recognise that sometimes our more urban areas will get potentially more calls to the police just by the nature of volume of people. But that doesn't necessarily detract from the importance of appropriate resource levels in our rural areas, whereas you describe distances to travel, greater geographical areas, and different types of crime and vulnerabilities are also require a quite specific policing presence. So I guess the assurance I would give from me is that on a daily basis, I look at the resource levels we've got against the call demand we've got, against what events we've got projected, against what investigations we've got ongoing. And I look to flex that resource in the best way possible within the gift that I've got to make sure that we can give the best service we can to communities. So I'm sorry that doesn't give you a direct number or breakdown number, but hopefully for the reasons I've explained, it's understandable.
Okay, Councillor Gregg. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I obviously appreciate the sensitivity of some of the operational matters with this being a public domain. And again, the thing that strikes me that's difficult at the moment is obviously with the cost of living crisis, there's so many people in rural areas that use heating oil, and thefts of that may possibly increase, again, depending on the volatile price of heating oil and things like that. And so it's just to make sure that the people that live in our rural areas don't feel that they have the same level of policing cover as what they would if they lived in a town centre.
No, and you're absolutely right to highlight that, and that is part of that how we respond to priorities. So it's the close monitoring of data and calls that we get in, and ensuring that not just policing itself, but how as a multi-agency we come together to deal with emerging trends, emerging challenges and incidents and otherwise that may come. The recent bad weather that was spoke about in the fire service report there, we drafted officers from Perth and Kinross and Dundee areas to support Angus because that was the priority over that weekend. And that happens in reverse in other times as well. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor Proctor.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Phil and Leanne, more or less, the question I was going to ask was very similar to what my colleague, Councillor Ross Gregg, had said. And I just want to thank you for the drop-in session, which I thought was quite invaluable. And I was actually going to ask the question at the drop-in session, but there are other people waiting in the queue, and I was quite conscious of that. When it was basically, and I think you've explained, you've given the full answer, but the local communities, particularly in the rural areas, seeing the police in the vicinity gives a sense of confidence, and certainly, you know, the police are not in evidence unless there's something actually up there happening. And you know, I mean, my ward, which stretches from Glen Isla and Glen Clover in the north to Inverarity and Newtell in the south. I mean, I was just wondering how many constables were available at any one time, you know, to look after that area.
So thanks, Councillor, and you know, I guess you know the response would be similar to what I've just given to Councillor Gregg. What is probably just an additionality, I suppose, in the basis of what you're asking there, and looking even at the figures within the Q2 report, is we are active in communities, and you can see that by the number of vehicles that are stopped, the number of speeding offences that are detected, but equally, it's the crime types we've already spoken about. You know, domestic abuse and sexual offending, some of it very historic, fraud in terms of the crimes that you see on our report there has been a continual rising area of policing demand. So that requires a slightly different means of policing than the physical foot patrols of old that clearly we still want and need for the purposes of prevention and community reassurance. But I also need to balance it with having people in specialist capability to be able to respond to cyber vulnerabilities, and that our communities are not just affected in the physical space, they're affected in the virtual space as well, or need, you know, that level of expertise and help for wider vulnerabilities and support. So just that reassurance again, that between Leanne and I, we regularly review, we look to ensure and absolutely value community engagement, everything that comes from that, and we always try to have as physical a policing presence as we possibly can. The value of it is unquestionable, but it's equally that balance with wider complexities of policing too.
Okay, thanks very much, Phil, and indeed Leanne, and thank you for your comments at the drop-in centre, saying that you'd hope to get you know, officers to attend some of the community councils, which gives that reassurance. And I do understand exactly what you said earlier on. Again, at the drop-in centre, you know, the problems with resources. Hopefully, you've got sufficient recruits to maybe fill the bill. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you both, Councillor Proctor and Phil. Phil, I've got a question, and Councillor Dorn might come in here as well, because we've had a lot of not complaints, concerns about the 20-mile-per-hour areas that were introduced across our ward, and the constituents are telling us that's if people are speeding in these 20-mile-per-hour zones, it's not enforceable. Is that correct?
So I think it's about prioritisation. I mean, what I would say is the focus comes right the way back to that point around about saving lives and road safety. So we will prioritise the focus of resourcing on the roads that we know from all of the statistics and all of the evidence present the greatest danger to road users. So that's why there is a greater sense of activity clearly on the more priority routes, and in Angus the A roads where we know there's a lot of accidents happen. Some of the 20-mile-an-hour zones, if they're outside schools, clearly they'll get that extra bit of attention, but otherwise it would be looking at measures such as speed monitoring equipment and other things we can have like that first. And if we clearly get a build-up of evidence that suggests that people are heavily speeding, then that can allow for that more directed approach. I hope that answers that for you.
Yeah, absolutely it does, Phil. And one of your colleagues told me quite some years ago, it's usually the same people, the regular users of the road, that do the speeding. So there we go. Okay, just guys.
That reporting in. But...
Councillor Dorn.
Yeah, I just wanted to come up in on that related to my question earlier around the speeding rates that had been observed, exactly what Councillor Fotheringham had said about like the increase in people contacting us about speeding in those areas, and a lot of them are within these 20-mile-per-hour zones. And there was some work done locally that I think, they recorded exactly that fact, that most of the people that were stopped were local to the area. So about awareness raising there that people should drive slower.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Doran. Okay, no further questions, comments? Councillor Doran? Oh. No?
Sorry, that was trying to turn the hand off and it came back on again.
That's okay. Any comments? Well, can I just say to our police colleagues, just what I said to our fire service colleagues, you do a fantastic job and you do a lot of community work as well. We see that in the press regularly. So take that back to your staff, Leanne and Phil, and just, thank you from the whole committee. It's absolutely excellent what you do. And I know it's difficult with resources and we're all the same nowadays. But keep up the good work. You're doing a good job. Okay, guys, we've got the recommendation and it's recommended that members note and scrutinise this operational report. I think we've done that quite well. That's agenda item 5A. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, we'll go to 5B then.
Thanks, convener, and thanks for those comments at the end there. I totally agree with you. Leanne and her team do a fantastic job for Angus, and I'm really grateful to her leadership for the area too. So appreciate you calling that out. In terms of the second paper we're presenting today, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce to you what is our draft Angus Police Plan for 2023 to 2026. And to highlight to you that this is now open to public consultation, with that having commenced on the 3rd of November. The local police plan explains how we will deliver on our policing priorities in Angus over the next 3 years, with the activities in turn contributing to the broader Police Scotland organisational objectives and also supporting the Angus community plan. And that's very much in the same way that we're involved in the scrutiny here today. We're reporting against the progress in the local policing plan that is current. So looking ahead, the development of the 2023-26 plan, it's offered and will continue to offer the opportunity to work together with our partners and communities to understand the priorities and to adjust or to improve what we do to keep people safe. The plan has been shaped very much so by a range of views, by data and assessment, and includes public feedback in the draft that you have before you. You'll also be aware, I think, that our local policing teams under Leanne's direction have been out and about across Angus and have been engaging with communities over several months now to garner feedback. And we've also been gathering feedback from our Your Police survey, as well as directly from partners and other stakeholders, so that we can have as many views as possible shaped into the plan. Those views and all that assessment is undoubtedly informed what you see in front, and that's now circulated for that consultation and further feedback in the more formal sense from across the community, from our elected members and from our wider stakeholders as we continue to develop this towards the final version. I guess the consultation period that opened on the 3rd of November, it will remain open until the early February. Time to reflect on the report, to obtain feedback and ultimately to refine the final version, which will come back to this committee into the new year. Feedback can be provided via an online portal or via email, and I'm fairly sure that members should have received a copy already. If not, you've certainly got it in your packs today. So our ask is not necessarily for loads of debate today, unless you wish to ask some questions, but just that you take the opportunity to consider the content of the report and to feedback comments via the online portal or via email or direct to Leanne and I. It's going to be open in terms of that consultation period for quite a number of weeks yet. We really appreciate your views and opinion in the same way that we do the public feedback and stakeholder feedback that will come in. So it's really just to present that to you in the fashion of it's open for consultation and to say that your support in respect of our local policing approach is very much appreciated as always.
And Phil, did you say that's open until February?
Yeah, I think it's the 12th of February is the closing date, but for the consultation, we'll be looking to come back because the final plan would look to commence from the 1st of April. So it would be that we will be refining the final copy up until that sort of period. So we've got through December, January to factor in any feedback.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell, did I see your hand going up? No.
Yeah, please. I did. I don't know if it stayed up. Just briefly, convener, if that's okay, I'll feedback officially. Yeah, I think the importance of partnership working and deepening that and trying to I guess consolidate and rationalise all the partnership forums that everyone's on, so we're not duplicating things, and I guess looking at people's pathways rather than silos is absolutely the way to go. But I wondered if you could maybe give us a wee bit more on bystander awareness and bystander training. I guess people are scared if they see something happening out, outside on the street, whatever, to get involved as a bystander. And I just wondered if you could maybe tease that out a wee bit for us today. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem, Councillor. So, well, firstly, no one agency and no one individual can make lasting change on their own. And your point around about that multi-agency effort is, for me, the key, because the collective strength we have will influence change, on a much quicker basis. So, bystander and other awareness-raising activities to try and give people across our communities and across our organisations in partnership the confidence to where it's inappropriate, and signpost out towards affecting and influencing someone else's behaviour in the prevention sense. And it's very much what That Guy campaign is about this year. It's about picking up the point and encouraging the ability to say, that's not really appropriate, and to try through that Guy campaign to do it in a way that doesn't necessarily generate conflict, because people will be anxious about that, because there are ways to challenge behaviour without necessarily stepping into conflict. So we continue to explore a number of approaches, both with authority and to schools, through licensed trade. We've got our Ask Angela campaign and various other different approaches that both look to help those that might not feel comfortable pushing in and not being that bystander, and encouraging and increasing confidence in those that would be prepared to step in. Leanne, I don't know from a local basis, just in terms of any things you might want to pitch in on, but
I think we've really covered it, and we just tend to try and go with what the national picture is, go with what our partners are doing as well. So not just from a police point of view, we like to share what our partners are involved in that as much as we can, but very much in our work out and about in communities is also doing that. So it doesn't need to all be over social media or media, it's actually speaking to people and trying to get these messages across is where we look to go locally.
Okay. Both. Councillor Dorn.
Yeah, I think my question follows on quite nicely from what was just been kind of discussed there. I was just wanted to know, really pleased to see the commitment to reducing stigma and harm of drug use, and I'm particularly interested in the performance measures and insights that will be carried forward into addressing whether these are being tackled, particularly around evaluation of the non-fatal overdose pathway and supporting people at risk of harm. But I also wanted to use this opportunity just to highlight that within the report, within the proposals, you've got to the continued promoting uptake of naloxone by members of the public, which is something that I raised at the last Angus Council meeting in a motion, so that every kind of member of staff at Angus Council could be supported in undertaking that training themselves, and to make sure fellow councillors do that as well, and anyone who might be watching this too, because it's available to everyone to do that. So I just wanted to kind of mention that. And yeah, I was interested in those performance measures and insights relating to reducing the stigma and harm.
Thanks, Councillor. I think you are a few more subtle changes. There are subtle changes and quite obvious changes compared to the previous 3-year plan, which is stepping much more into that partnership, prevention, multi-agency space, and I really welcome that because of the activity and the positive relationship we've got ongoing locally. Statutorily we come together because I think in Angus we do so because we've just got a real good sense of a well-established multi-agency approach, and through whether it be the chief officer groups or the subgroups around about violence against women, the adult protection committees and otherwise, and in terms of those insights and measures, it's trying to look that by the time we come into the next reporting year, that as I'm coming to you in this committee, that I'm maybe able to bring reporting in a slightly different way, that rather than going in that traditional box of figures are important, that we can start to bring alive some of the challenges in a bit more detail, and you'll see that by maybe becoming a little bit more thematic in our reporting periods is a proposal where we can get into a bit more detail on some of the qualitative aspects of the response instead of just the quantitative that often is the case that we fall into. So look forward to as we develop the plan further and then bring it alive.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, balancing those two things is really important to be able to see. And I suppose within bringing the reports to us, it's important how other agencies can help support your work as well by sharing that data that you have access to, which is really important in that partnership working. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? No comments? Well, there's just one recommendation to note and scrutinise. Is this report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And at this stage, Mr. Armstrong used to remind me to release the police and the fire service. You don't have to sit through the meeting. You're very welcome to if you wish. But thank you all, 4 of you, for your contribution in your reports. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next quarterly meeting of the committee when your reports come back. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Thank you, committee.
Okay, members, agenda item number 6 is the internal audit activity update. And Mrs. Wiley, I think you're going to talk to this one. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This is the update on where we are with the internal audit work that's currently in progress, and a position statement on where we are with the outstanding actions that are still to be implemented in services. One of the items we're reporting this time round is one carried forward from 22-21 plan, and once that's been reported, there are only 2 left that have been carried forward, which I'm hoping we'll be able to bring to you in January, that are being worked on at the moment. So I'd like to ask Paul Kelly from Assets if he would give us the information around the end users IT audit that was undertaken, and that is on page 116 of your papers. And then once Paul's done that, if I could come back to finish presenting this before we take questions, please.
Yes, absolutely. No problem at all.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, convener. So just a brief introduction to this report. So it was slightly unusual in nature. It was really looking to give reassurance around about the extent to which what we term end user solutions were in place. And these are things like Excel spreadsheets, and Access databases have been created locally within services and used as business tools beyond what either would be developed by third parties or off-the-shelf products. So just in the conclusion to this report, maybe just highlight that. So we've regarded it as substantial assurance, and I just wanted to highlight that specifically because when you look at the control assessment ratings, we do have all six of the controls regarded as amber. But the reason for that, and we've set out in the paper under the conclusion, is that from a review and looking at a detailed review of files on the network and things that do exist as end user solutions, there's actually very low risk to the council overall from those that we did find, and there is an ongoing project as well that will tackle this going forward. So we don't believe there's significant risk from what exists on the network. But maybe just very briefly turning to the key findings, all of which are priority 3, we did highlight that there wasn't an inventory of end user solutions, and we've recommended that as part of that Angus Council Data to the Cloud project that the work is undertaken to identify any end user solutions that do exist that didn't come up during our review, and where higher risk solutions are identified, the service management in conjunction with digital and IT should look to put mitigating controls in place, including migrating to an off-the-shelf solution as part of that, as that's financially and operationally feasible. And the final part there is, should there be a need to maintain low and medium risk end user solutions, that there needs to be some clearer guidance around about governance, security, data protection, etc. as part of that. I'll hand over to Kathy, and I'll be happy to take any questions you've got in the report after Kathy finishes her update.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item that we're telling you about today is on 10, and that's around the continuous auditing that we undertake. Today we're presenting information around the payroll and the creditors work that we've done. The payroll information is from the period from April, and we're providing comprehensive assurance around the testing that we've undertaken, which is looking at duplicate national insurance numbers, duplicate bank account numbers, any high value payments, and also any NI numbers that are missing, and all of that testing was satisfactory. There were also a couple of queries that were outstanding from before April 2022, which we now have satisfactory explanations for, so there's nothing of any concern in the work that we've done on that payroll. In terms of creditors, we're reporting on duplicate payments for the month of September. We're having substantial assurance around this. There was one duplicate payment identified for £1,600 during September, and arrangements have been made to request for that to be repaid to the council. And we're still waiting for the information around the testing on the same person registering and then authorising creditors for payment. And then the final piece in this report is the information around the outstanding actions from internal audit recommendations and counter fraud recommendations. The tables are there. I don't have any particular concerns about what's still outstanding. It doesn't go back too far in time, and the numbers of recommendations there are reasonable. There has been a movement from the last time from some items going from not yet reached their date into the due dates being extended. But again, I'm not overly concerned, and I don't want to bring anything in particular to your attention around these. But happy now for any questions that you've got for Paul and I to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wiley. You've answered the one about the duplicate payment. I was going to ask that, although it's not some money. This is for me actually, what is a programme of random cash counts?
We turn up in places that have cash without telling them we're coming to see whether the cash equals what it should in the books.
Right, okay. Right, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Dorden.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one about clarity on risk of data loss relating to that. If you could explain a little bit more if that is one of the risks in this area that's been identified, just to make it a little bit clearer, or if you're happy that the mitigations in place will avoid any of that. I'm thinking in the context of like GDPR and information that's stored by the council.
Yeah, I think we did identify from a review three systems that are three solutions that you would identify as systems, but none of them were what would really help personal information, etc. So from a GDPR perspective, we did think very carefully about the overall rating of the reports and looking at, given we did a huge amount of data analysis of what work, looking at file names, look at file sizes, etc., and we were comfortable that risk from a GDPR perspective was reasonable for what did exist there. There is a wider element, and it's what Angus Council Digital to the Cloud, Data to the Cloud is actually looking to do, and it's tidy up the data it's actually held, and rather it's been held for long periods of time, and just it's almost admin and general management that needs to be undertaken.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Any other questions? No comments? Okay, there's 2 recommendations in the report. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much. So members, agenda item number 7 is the Corporate Counter Fraud Mid-Year Review. Mrs. Wiley, I think you have the floor again. Thank you.
Thank you. This report is giving you an update on the activities of the counter fraud team for the last 6 months, and it talks about some of the work that we do that is reactive, some of it is proactive, and some of it is directed nationally in terms of the National Fraud Initiative. So just a couple of highlights out of this. On page 123, you can see there that we had 9 investigations concluded during the period, and these covered things around abuse of working hours, corrupt practices, missing monies, fraudulent grant claims, falsified footnotes, and undeclared conflicts of interest. We also undertake proactive work around data matching, and we've been working on some matches to do with the electoral roll and the council tax records, and that work is ongoing. There's also work undertaken around raising awareness of fraud risks and looking at the counter that are in place and how staff can help to make sure that fraud doesn't occur, and to report it to the team when they do suspect something. In terms of the housing tenancy work that we've undertaken, there have been 2 tenancies returned to the council during the period. The National Fraud Initiative, we're back at the beginning of that 2-year cycle again, so the information's been uploaded during November, at the beginning of the year, January, February time, to start working on that again next year. We recently undertook a review against good practice for serious organised crime, and the team leader in counter fraud has been involved in helping to raise awareness of that throughout the council and arranging training for people, which I think some of the members have probably been on as well. So that's something else that the counter fraud team's been involved in recently. And going forward, we'll continue with the programme of work. We will respond to any queries and suspicions that are raised to the team during the next period, and carry on with some of the proactive work and the National Fraud Initiative work that's coming through. In terms of the financial implications, there are no direct implications except that from the work that the fraud team undertakes, we're able to recover some monies, and in the period there we identified £64,000 compared to a figure of £51,000 in the same period last year. I do have Ewan Ritchie, who is the team leader for counter fraud, with us. Hopefully he'll be able to answer any detailed questions that you have around this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wiley. Can you tell me 4.7 on page 124, housing tenancy fraud? What does that entail?
I might ask Ewan just to give you a bit of information on that, because he'll know more than I do about it.
Thanks, convener. What that would generally entail would be where one of our council houses has either been abandoned or sublet, or the tenancy for that council house has been the succession has been applied for in a improper way.
Okay.
In general terms, it's abandoned houses that we find.
Thank you very much, Ewan. Thank you. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, convener. It's my concern I'm concerned with the subletting of council tenancies. Subletting allows tenants to charge more than they are paying for the rent, and they get extra income if they are claiming housing. Also, I'd like to raise the question about the council garages, and this fits in with the first question. Many of these garages are not being used for vehicles, which is breach of their agreement again. And lastly, many of my constituents contact me regarding the cohabiting of couples, where one partner is not on household details and the other is in receipt of full housing benefit. This would be where the person is not declared and is in full-time employment. So what are we doing to combat this? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would say in the first instance with subletting of council houses, that's not something that's well, certainly hasn't been alleged at any time in the period covered by this report, although we have had instances that have been alleged in the past. My feeling about that is I haven't uncovered any organised subletting. Where it exists, I would suggest it might be more a casual arrangement within families that would allow this to happen, and thus it makes it more difficult to detect. But it's not been brought up as a great problem, certainly in this reporting period. As far as council garages, that's not something that's come through the reporting lines for counter fraud. Although naturally, I'd be very keen to look at any particular allegations that had been made or particular concerns that there were that these types of tenancies had been defrauded. And your final point about undeclared living together relationships where full housing benefit is being paid, this type of work, it was something that we did in Angus Council, but that stopped in 2015 when this type of work was taken back by the DWP. So although I'm happy to any referral that I receive, and I do receive referrals of this nature, I certainly pass them on. It's not something that we retain the responsibility or for looking at or the powers to look into either.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nicholl, you happy with that?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. My question is along similar kind of lines as that of Councillor Nicholl, housing tenancy fraud. With relation to the investigation of the tenancy fraud allegations that led to the successful recovery of 2 council properties in 22-23, did you state that those council properties were because they'd been abandoned? And if that was the case, do you know what the reason for the abandonment of those properties was, and what kind of conditions were they found in, as in how much work was needed to be done to them in order to put them back out for other tenants?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, they were indeed both abandoned. As for the condition of the properties, I'm sorry, I'm not aware there are particular problems with the condition of either property, but that's not something I've got an answer to for you just now, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. I was just curious as to obviously what additional cost it would have come out of the housing budget to re-let those properties. Thank you.
Yeah, well, like I say, I don't actually know, but I'm not. It wasn't the investigations weren't embarked upon with any particular feel that the properties had been in any way abused, other than they'd been abandoned.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor Speed.
Yep. Thanks, Convener. I'm aware of complaints regarding unlicensed houses of multiple occupancy. I appreciate this is maybe not quite corporate fraud, but unlicensed properties such as this put residents at risk of not only exploitation but also their safety. For example, maybe appropriate fire safety measures might not be installed. So I've reported these concerns several times. I just wondered if I was able to get a bit of detail just on, you know, how big a problem this is and what's been done to combat it and who takes the lead. Appreciate that housing do have an input, but it's obviously a crime as well in terms of reporting onto the police.
Okay. From housing here that can answer this. It's probably more a housing issue, is it? Or could you or Kathy answer that? No?
I think the housing regulator has some input to that, but I think you're right. I think it would be a report into the police because it would be against the rules of what is allowed in these housing, but it's not something that our counter fraud team deals with.
You okay, Councillor Spade? Do you want to maybe email housing and ask them?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else for questions? Okay, comments? Well, we've got one recommendation, and I think we've been asked to review and scrutinise the contents of the report. I think we've done that pretty well. Is this report agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll now go on to agenda item number 8, detailed risk reporting to Scrutiny Audit Committee. Mrs. Wiley, I think it's you again.
Yes, although I'm only going to introduce the Chief Executive, who I think is going to speak about the detail of this report. Just before that, I just want to say this is the Transforming for the Future risk, which is just in the normal programme that's been agreed. Although the scoring for this risk has been increased in November, there weren't any other significant changes to the risk register, so I haven't asked you to reconsider the programme, and we'll just continue with the programme for early 2023 as it currently stands in the paper. And all that remains now really is just to hand over to Chief Executive for her to tell you a bit more about this risk and let you ask some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. Mrs. Williamson.
Thank you, Mrs. Wiley. Yeah, as has happened in the other Scrutiny Audit committees, we're bringing forward each of the detailed risks from the corporate risk register each time we meet. And this is probably the overarching risk that sits with me as the Chief Executive of the Council, and it's about transforming the Council. And really, it's about our failure to transform or redesign how we deliver services and how that impacts on our finances. So, as you can imagine, we monitor this one very closely as a corporate leadership team. A couple of Scrutiny Audit committees ago, you heard Mr. Lorimer talk about the financial situation, and clearly come February, we will be bringing forward a budget, a recommended budget to members around the next 3 years. And clearly it will have significant challenges in that. The other side of that, though, is members will be aware we had our best value report published this summer, and it praised a lot of work that the council has been doing around improvement. And if I can just quote from the best value report, what the National Auditor said was they were pleased with an impressive pace of improvement demonstrated by Angus Council since their previous BV reports in 2016 and 2010. So they have seen significant transformation, significant service redesign, and a willingness of colleagues throughout the council working very closely with elected members to do things differently, to do things more efficiently, and probably more fundamentally now, particularly as we look to the future, to do things in partnership with other colleagues within Angus interested in the same sorts of things that we're interested in doing, but other partners throughout Tayside, other partners in the public sector, and making sure that, just as the Christie Commission said 10 years ago, there was little duplication or no duplication at all in terms of the work that we do to get the best out of the public pound. So if ever there was a time not to be complacent about what said in the best value report, and to really think again about what else can we be doing to protect public services, it's now. So transforming the future, that risk has got a number of mitigating controls that we continue to look at and consider. And some of these you'll see on page 35 forward. So just to pick up a couple of them, one of them which is really important is we have a multi-party PBSG. So at that PBSG sub, there's a lot of discussion around possibility. And these discussions being across the different parties within Angus is really helpful to us as officers. We have a strong collaborative corporate team of officers, and one of the things that the Best Value picked up was strong leadership by elected members working well with each other and with officers. Now that has not changed as a consequence of a change of administration. Service design and development work with staff continues, and we are looking to work with other councils, public bodies, and also looking at what other people are doing throughout the UK who are also facing changes to finances and how things are currently delivered. Training and development is really important to us, engagement and communication with our staff. And just this morning, we had a session with over 100 employees, just talking about transformation, talking about what else could we be doing to mitigate the risk and the challenge to the people of Angus, the people that we serve and the people we're here to serve. I have weekly meetings with the leader, and I also have an annual appraisal with elected members who quite rightly challenge performance on a regular basis and how well we are improving. So this risk is really here to give you sight of this work, why it's such an important piece of risk monitoring for us collectively as a Scrutiny and Audit Committee and probably as a council. And I'm very happy to answer any questions on that.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Williamson. I'll take questions in a minute, but I remember when you came, I was on the panel when you came to this council, and you have always said you always wanted the best value for the public pound. And I think you get that, and your team, Mr. Lorimer, all your directors, I think they do an excellent job. Absolutely first class. So thank you for all you do. Questions? Councillor Speed, is that an old hand?
Sorry, yeah.
Councillor Dorn.
Yes.
Okay.
Have you heard me? Yeah.
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 Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Dorn now. Question.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, my question is around some of relating to some of the speed of the transformation and around the ability to, I know this is a very internal focused document, but I wondered if you could expand a little bit on, in the speed of turnaround of the transformation, how there might be consultation with external audiences on some of the proposals that might be put forward. I'm thinking particularly around like the point around service delivery as the consequence of COVID-19 and moving forward from that. So is that embedded in already? Have we got enough time to do that and address that within the programme that's in front of us? Thanks.
So where we can, and particularly when it's a big, we'll consult with the public, we'll consult with residents. We do that in various ways. Sometimes when it's a specific service, for example, to do with housing, we'd go to tenants. If it's to do with education, perhaps we'd engage the school communities. So there's a lot of consultations going on throughout the work that we do. In terms of our budget, and when we start to engage with members around budget time about what we're doing, we try to involve them as much as we possibly can. The extent of the change that is coming over the next 3 years will require probably quite a considerable engagement with elected members and elected members engaging with the public in order for them to represent their views around the decisions that will be made. I think it's fair to say that we cannot consult on everything, and that's why we have 28 elected representatives to make the choices that are probably going to be pretty challenging this year. But I come back to this risk being about transformation and what changes can protect the service and maybe deliver it in a different way, but still keep the service. So we will do that as best we can, and we will inform the public, or we consult them and engage them to get the best way forward with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dorn, you fine? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, convener, and thanks, Margot, for this. I just I wanted to tease out a couple of things around the scoring, just for a bit of extra reassurance, I guess. On page 136, the risk likelihood score is 3, and on page 137, the target likelihood, target impact, and overall target score are quite low, which is hopefully achievable. But I was wondering how you triangulate that. I guess I felt the risk likelihood score at 3 was maybe a bit on the low side, but that might just be a reflection of my anxieties and a very personal, subjective view. How do you sense check that? Do you do it externally with other local authorities as well, perhaps? And I would just like a bit of background on that, because I feel it a bit wobbly about that 3. Thanks.
Yeah, and you said it yourself, Councillor Bell. You know, I mean, scores. There's a degree of subjectivity to scores. The reason why the mitigations bring the score down quite considerably is, as you can see, they're all green. And I feel that the measures we've put in place over a decent period of time, developing the culture of change and the willingness for a number of different groups to come together to recognise practice elsewhere and try to embed that within the council if it brings an improvement, if it's better for us. We've got enough evidence of that. I don't want to be complacent about the best value report, as I said, but the best value report was probably the best value report I've certainly read in the past year. And it did say that we were in a very strong position around our change. And you've possibly heard me say this before, over many years of prudence with Angus Council. And I think, you know, that evolving change, we have come to a place that is a good foundation for the next 3 years around further transformation and change. So there's enough, I feel there's enough evidence there, and engaging with other colleagues within the organisation, there's enough evidence there to say that we recognise the risk, but we have good mitigations and controls in place that will stand us in good stead as we go forward into the next year. Bearing in mind, this is not a kind of one-off document, it's a live document that we're at the time. So that's why the scores where it is, you know, equally it could have been higher. It's one of these discussions that we have. I think the key thing here is the mitigations, and the mitigations being the appropriate mitigations. And if there are any other mitigations we can be considering to add, then we would put them in and monitor them on a regular basis as well.
Okay, Councillor Bell. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Shepherd.
Thanks. Just obviously the difficult situation in the report there. I'm just wondering from either maybe a comment from Margot or Ian on things over the longer term. Like, how will this council need to look in maybe 20 years' time if the situations don't change with budgets, inflation? You know, if things don't change, you know, the future is always a great unknown. And I'm just wondering if they could look at a comment on the longer term future of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Mrs. Williamson.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up, and Ian can come in if he wants after me. It's a great question, and certainly, you know, as we look over the changes that are required and the capacity we've got to change for the next 3 years, it is really, really challenging, more challenging than I have ever experienced in my whole life in public service. So at what point does it come that it can't be done? I mean, transformation, partnership, working with others, but we also have a huge list of statutory duties we have to deliver. And I think it's incumbent on us as public servants to try as much as we can to work with others to still deliver these statutory duties and maximise the work that's going across anybody who's working within Angus in order to deliver that. But how sustainable is it for us, for how long, if the reduction in public finances continue? So that's really the kind of multi-dollar question, isn't it? But I certainly feel a strong sense of expectation from colleagues in Scottish Government to be coming forward with transformational changes that look quite different from what we've done before. And some of these things will involve, sharing teams across bigger geographical areas. We do that already through things like Tayside contracts, again, a very good model. And coming up with as many different ways as we possibly can to ensure that we still have resilience as a public service to deliver. But I'm not underestimating the challenges, particularly when we get to 3 years hence, which is where we're looking at the moment in terms of medium-term financial planning.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd. Okay, maybe Michael.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting off mute there.
That's
So
okay.
thanks for that, Margot. It's that question I just felt has to be asked, because we know that the short term is going to be hard, but it's just, so it's something that's in the back of everyone's mind. And it worries me. Genuinely as a councillor, it worries me, and I just hope that we can all work together. And we don't want to see special measures. I know nobody wants to see that happen to any council, just speaking broadly. And it's incumbent on all of us to do our very best in these difficult times ahead. So thanks for that comment. Thank you.
Thank you both. This is maybe one for Ian. Mr. Lorimer, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I maybe should ask it at the next agenda item. But we're hearing about public service pay increases. What can this council afford? Because we've seen it in the press within the last few weeks that 5%, we're going to get 5%. Can we afford 5% for wage increases, or is it going to be 1.5% to 2%?
Thank you for that question, convener. I do have a report in relation to pay and the cost of pay and the implications of that. I do actually have a report. It was initially planned for Policy and Resources Committee, but it wasn't quite ready in time. So I'll now bring that to Council. So without seeming to dodge the question, it might be better to have that discussion at Council when that report comes forward. The funding position of the Council, as was discussed when Council considered the medium-term budget strategy on the 3rd of November. We're projecting a £52 million gap over the next three financial years. That's 19% of our current budget. So that's the context. That suggests that pay increases, if they're not funded by additional support through government or through council tax increases, are really very difficult to afford. And that remains the position. But I'm probably happier to say a bit more about that when I can provide the detailed report that will be coming to Council in a couple of weeks, convener, if that's okay.
No, Mr. Lorimer, that's absolutely fine. I just thought I'd better ask it because I've had a few people contact me about it. What can we afford? What can we not? So I thought I'll ask it anyway. Thank you. Any other questions on this report? Councillor Bell, is that an old hand? That's it.
Yeah,
that's
sorry,
right.
my
That's all right.
buttons. I've got a dodgy button.
That's all right. No problem at all. Right. Any comments then on this report? No, we've got one recommendation. I think we've scrutinised it well enough and a few questions have been asked. Is this report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So we'll go on to number 9 now, the Angus Council annual accounts. And I think there's no introduction needed here. It'll be Mr. Lorimer that will speak to this one.
Yeah, thanks very much, convener. Yeah, this is a significant report in the calendar for the Scrutiny and Audit Committee. I'll say a little bit by way of introduction, but we also have Carol Grant and Rachel Brown from Audit Scotland to speak to their report, the auditor's report to members. So the report in terms of the accounts and the auditor's report, that's the culmination of months of work in terms of preparation of the accounts. It covers a whole year of activity, covers our financials, our governance, financial management, best value, performance, a whole range of different things. So as I say, it's a significant and important report in the calendar for Scrutiny and Audit Committee. And everything that we do in this arena is really important in terms of public confidence in the council's stewardship of public funds. Now, the auditor's report, it's an independent view of the council in the key areas that have been highlighted within the report. And I think I always certainly welcome that independent and critical eye. I think that helps us to improve. Again, welcome the report. It's been a very challenging year to prepare and audit. I'm sure Carol or Rachel will mention that. To both prepare and audit the accounts. I'd like to just at this moment thank my team. They're the ones that prepare the detail of the accounts among many other duties that they have. But also like to thank the external audit team for the diligent way they've gone about the audit to get us to this point where we hopefully are able to sign off the 21-2 accounts today. This last year, or the preparation of the 21-22 accounts, has been especially challenging, mainly because of staffing vacancies within the teams that are responsible for that. But there's also been some issues. Again, inflation and higher inflation is never far away from causing problems for us. And this year, that inflationary impact has had a bit of an effect in terms of the asset valuations. Those vacancies and some of the issues around valuations have led to delays in some of the corrections that you see in the accounts, which are referred to in the covering report and the auditor's report. Some of those issues on asset valuations are not unique to Angus. There are some, I think all or most accounts preparers and auditors have had one or two issues around valuation of assets this year. So that's something that is to be looked at on a national basis for next year. As I say, Carol Grant, who's the audit director and the person who has the honour of signing off the audit certificate, Carol will go into more detail on our report. So I don't want to say too much and steal Carol's thunder in a sense. But just a couple of things. The annual accounts, they're now substantially complete to the point of being ready to be signed off. They do run to over 130 pages. This is a massive amount of work for both us and for the audit team. And as is the role of the Scrutiny and Audit Committee, the ask would be, once we've finished discussing the item, for the committee to authorise the accounts for signature. That's a specific role the committee has in doing that. I'm not, because of the detail in the accounts, I'm not going to try and attempt to summarise them, but just to say the management commentary, which is at the very start of the accounts, that's really intended as a non-technical summary. It still runs to 30 pages, mind you, but it's a summary of the council's finances, our performance strategies, and our priorities, all of those different things. The audit process has identified a few changes to the accounts, particularly around the balance sheet and the balance sheet valuations of non-current assets. And no doubt Carol will want to say a little bit about that. But there's also been a couple of changes which have increased our general fund reserve, as described in Appendix C to the report. The good news is that the accounts for the council, for the Angus Council Charitable Trust, and for the Strang Mortification Charity, they're all unqualified. We shouldn't ever just take that for granted. That is a big deal in my view, and welcome news. I think there's other points you'll see from the report in terms of key messages, that it's helpful to have an independent conclusion that we have effective financial management arrangements, our systems of internal control are operating well. The report rightly flags some of the challenges around financial sustainability, which we've just been talking about on the last item, and obviously that remains at the forefront of our thinking and our worries at the moment. And there's also positive comments around governance and transparency, and of course elected members are a key part of that. And a reminder about the very positive outcomes from our best value report. There are some recommendations, and some of the actions, recommended actions, I should say, some of those have been rolled forward from last year, and we're more than happy to accept those. We do recognise those are areas that need to be improved. So overall, I think a positive report, a small number of areas for improvement, which is, I say, is welcome in terms of helping us to improve. Convener, this is the final year of the appointment of the current audit team. The current team has been our auditors for the last 6 years. And if I could also record my thanks in particular to Carol, to Rachel and to Chris. Those are the kind of main protagonists we work with for their approach to the audit during that period. We haven't always agreed. There have been areas of disagreement and so forth, as you would imagine. But we've always enjoyed a professional and fair relationship with the audit team, and you know that's obviously helped us with the work that we have to do here. If I hand over to Carol, Convener, at this point, and then we could maybe circle back to questions either at the end, if that's okay.
Absolutely, and I certainly remember in my time being on the council, and that's 10.5 years now, I certainly remember both ladies, Rachel and Carol, being in the chamber when we had the in-person meetings. So, Carol, if you have the honour, as Mr. Lorimer says, of signing off our accounts, you now have the honour of speaking to the committee. Thank you.
I do indeed, and thank you very much. And it's great to be here, albeit virtually, today to talk to you. Ian has taken us through some of the detail in the report, but if you will humour me, I'll take us through at a reasonable pace just some of the key things I want to draw out from the report, and then, as Ian said, happy to take questions, whether for myself or for finance, once I've been through the report. So if I can start on Appendix A, and apologies, I don't know what page number it is because I don't have the full pack. But yeah, if we can start on Appendix A to the paper that Ian was talking to, just to confirm our work on the accounts of the council, the charitable trust and the Strang mortification is now complete. I can confirm that the outstanding bit of information that was detailed at paragraph 11 has also now been resolved. So there's nothing in relation to outstanding points or information that I need to draw to your attention. I'll just move into the annual audit report in a minute, but just to say that report, the process is such that report remains in draft until the accounts are signed, and then it will be reissued in final subsequent to the signing. We have no unadjusted misstatements in relation to the council's audited accounts, and at paragraph 7 in Appendix A, we just draw attention to an unadjusted misstatement in the Strang mortification, which overstates expenditure by £133, and we're just drawing that to your attention because of the clearly trivial threshold that has been set, so that is above our threshold. The key thing in Appendix A is at paragraph 8, and that is an auditing standard requirement that in presenting this report to yourselves as those charged with governance, we are seeking confirmation of anything you want to draw to our attention. So any instances of any actual suspected or alleged fraud, any events that you're aware of that subsequent to the date of the financial statements that you want to draw to my attention, or any non-compliance with laws or regulations. So this is the awkward bit where I generally pause for a brief second and see if any hands go up, and then I will move on.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Any questions for?
No, that's all good.
Oh, you're getting off lightly. Oh no, there's one. Councillor Beattie.
Yeah, so, sorry for running with a question there. Could you maybe tease apart what the non-current assets are for me, please?
So apologies, yes, I've still to move into the report, so I will absolutely pick that up. This was just an auditing standard requirement where I pause in case there was anything you wanted to draw to my attention in relation to the fraud, etc. So if you could bear with me, apologies, I wasn't clear on that. I'll just pick it up now. Thank you. So moving into the body of the report, which is attached at Appendix B to the paper. Paragraph 11 of that report just confirms that we comply with the Financial Reporting Council's ethical standards. It's important, as those charged with governance, that you are comforted by that, that we haven't undertaken any non-audit related services, which might we should draw to your attention, and also that there aren't any relationships that compromise our objectivity and independence as the external auditors providing you that assurance. As I've already mentioned, as Ian said, the audit opinions are unmodified. We just mentioned at paragraph 17, you may recall that in the last 2 years, there has been an emphasis of matter paragraph that has been required in the auditor's report because of uncertainty in relation to the valuations because of the situation with COVID, etc. So that paragraph has been removed from the valuer's report, so we no longer need to have an emphasis of matter paragraph in our audit report. We make a recommendation just underneath paragraph 19 in relation to the kind of resourcing of the audit process. Obviously, Ian has mentioned it as well in terms of the pressures that staff are under, and we recognise that. So it's just something moving forward in terms of ensuring all the processes are in place to support the audit process and ensure it to progress efficiently and as smoothly as possible. Moving into Exhibit 2, which I think is the point, Councillor Beattie, that you were talking about, just in terms of the significant findings from the audit. So the first one relates to the valuation of assets valued at depreciated replacement cost. And those were the assets that material valuation uncertainty related to in the valuation report in the last 2 years. So it was an area that we were aware that there may well be movements in the market, movement in the costs that would result in a change in terms of the valuation. The valuer actually included a line in the valuation report this year, which basically stated that anything that hadn't been revalued in year and had been valued in the previous years from 2018 up to 2021 would be understated, but gave no indication as to the extent of that understatement. So we obviously spoke to finance colleagues, and as we say in the resolution column, there was a further valuation of 37 assets that fell into that category. So they hadn't been revalued in year and therefore had revaluations that were 1 to 4 years old, depending on where they fell in the rolling programme. That was a net book value of 1.4 million, and Rachel will know the figure, but I think it was between 85 to 90% of the total asset value that hadn't been revalued in year. So it gave us really good coverage and a lot of assurance in relation to that. As a result of that, the financial statements have been adjusted by 38.3 million for the council assets and 4.6 million for the common good assets. So that really reflects that, you know, the valuer's kind of concern in the report, and that warning really came through in terms of the valuation that was done. I'll pause there, Councillor Beattie, in case there's anything specific in relation to that you would like to pick up.
No, that was a good description. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we've made a recommendation in relation to this specific point, because the code allows a rolling 5-year programme evaluations, and what we're seeing, particularly as you would expect with kind of the inflation as it sits at the moment, what we are recommending to the council is just to reflect on the robustness of that and whether there needs to be some tweaks in relation to how often certain asset categories are revalued, just to ensure that they aren't materially misstated in the intervening periods. So that's the recommendation there. We do make another recommendation in relation to the non-current asset accounting, and really that is just about the mechanics of it and the complicated nature. And at the crux of it is just about the robustness of the asset register and ensuring that makes the process as simple as forwards in terms of the really technically complex area of accounting for non-current assets. We have a couple of other points within the exhibit in relation to the accounting for prepayment. And again, we've made a recommendation on that. And just a slight movement in the exit package disclosures, just because of the completeness of the disclosures within that. The final point was just in relation to the share of Tayside contracts in relation to Angus Council's share of that. And again, just a minor movement in relation to recognising the share within the accounts. All of these have been adjusted within the audited accounts that you are now, we are now seeking for you to approve in terms of the signing of it. Just to confirm in Exhibit 3 that the risks that we drew to your attention in the annual audit plan, we have completed our work and we have concluded positively in relation to them. So I have no issues to draw to your attention in relation to that. The Appendix C to the cover paper, which Ian talked about, draws out the misstatements and gives a bit more detail in relation to them. So we have talked about them in the exhibit. We summarise them in paragraphs 37 and 38, but Appendix C that Ian has pulled together really gives a good insight into what has occurred and the impact of it. Just very quickly moving into the other sections, so just in relation to financial management, the council operated within its budget, and we do know the budget processes are appropriate, and also that 86% of planned efficiency savings were achieved, which is a very healthy place to be in terms of that achievement of efficiency savings. It isn't always easy to achieve those, particularly on a recurring basis, so we draw that out there. We do note the increase in the level of general fund reserves, but also that the vast majority of this is earmarked for future purposes. As Ian mentioned, the financial systems and internal control operated effectively, and that the standards of conduct and arrangements for the prevention and detection of fraud and error are appropriate. We just note at paragraph 55 that we are still concluding our audit work in relation to an area of correspondence, and we will report the outcome of this to yourselves in due course once we've concluded our work. On financial sustainability, obviously it's been an area that's been picked up in the previous item. We know the financial pressures that are facing Angus Council alongside all other councils and public sector bodies, including the cost of living crisis and the impact of the pandemic, and the work that's ongoing to formulate a response in relation to that. As Ian has said, we comment on the significant financial challenges in terms of the potential funding gap, and we also make a recommendation in terms of concluding the long-term financial planning framework. We recognise that it's a moving feast and that it has to be revisited regularly, but we do think it's an important step in terms of that, longer-term focus and that longer-term sustainability. Governance and transparency, appropriate governance arrangements are in place to support effective scrutiny challenge and informed decision making. And also we make a recommendation in relation to the performance reporting arrangements, which is actually a kind of story that flowed through the best value assurance report as well. You will see the sections of the report from financial management through to the best value are probably shorter than in previous years. And obviously that's because of the recent best value assurance report that considered all of these areas in detail. And what we've done in the report is just highlight the key messages and make the linkages. So we're not repeating the same information in multiple reports, but that we're just pointing to it where appropriate. Appendix 1 contains the action plan, including the agreed management response and timings, which I'm content with. And finally, I would just want to thank Ian and all of his team and everyone across the council for engaging, not just in terms of the preparation of the annual audit report, but the best value assurance report that has gone before this year. And obviously the support from yourselves as elected members and engagement over the course of the audit appointment, which has been invaluable. So I'll just pause there, Convener, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, that was very comprehensive, Carol. Thank you very much. Any questions? Oh, you might be. This might be. Oh, Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. This is really, it's not about the full accounts, it's not about the audit report. It's a very small matter in the scheme of things, I guess, but it's about the Angus Council Charitable Trust. And, I know well, no, I don't know the amount of work your team goes through, Ian. It's absolutely huge, but I am absolutely delighted to read that it says at number 7, plans for the future, that revisions to our existing arrangements have been agreed with Oscar, and that we will soon be operating a single Angus-wide fund, which will mean we can provide support across the county, because we've not been able to do that for such a long time. Could I just ask somebody when this will start and how it will be advertised to the public?
Convener, I'm happy to pick that one up if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yes, on you go.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Councillor Devine. Yeah, so this is, I suppose, business that is separate to that of the council, because as councillors, all 28 councillors are trustees of the Angus Council Charitable Trust. Now, the trustees agreed, it was probably about this time last year, maybe December last year, to effectively move to that same wide approach to the management of the funds. We have since, within the last few weeks, had confirmation from Oscar that is okay. That is something that we can implement. So the plan is to bring a report updating all trustees on that position, as well as bringing forward the audited accounts. We'll get a meeting set up for that in January. And then the intention would be to operate the fund on that revised basis from the beginning of the new financial year, so from the 1st of April 2023. But as I say, we'll bring a report to trustees setting that out early into the new year.
Thanks very much, Ian, and thanks to the team who did that, because it is over and above review.
Thank you very much, Ian and Councillor Devine. Any other questions? Comments? No? Okay, then we've got 5 recommendations. The one below it is for the councils. Is this report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Carol and Rachel, for your input. That was very detailed. Thank you very much. Okay, we will go to agenda item number 10, and it's a report by the Director of Legal and Democratic Services, Mrs. Buchanan.
Thank you, Convener. This is our RIPSA update report, our quarterly report. I do appreciate that, as per probably in the past since I've been involved, certainly there's no investigatory activities to be reported, but it is recommended that we do this in terms of best practice report 2, that is the case. So just really for members to noting that. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mrs. Buchanan. As Mrs. Buchanan says, there's been no authorisations for surveillance and other investigatory activities. Is this report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And the final item, agenda item number 7, Mrs. Buchanan, it's yourself again, and it's the Complaints and Compliments Report, 1st of July to 30th of September 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Just to go through the recommendations with members, noting the complaint stats, the complement statistics also, and also the complaints received by service, which are detailed in terms of the appendix, appendix 2 that is. A couple other points to note: the total number of complaints received in quarter 2 is 71. Within those figures, there is only 1 reported for Children, Families and Justice. Because they separately narrate the reports or keep a note of them, it's become apparent that's not the correct figure. Our complaints officer, Ms. Whitted, is looking into that at the moment with IT to work out what the issue is, and we'll report back to the committee once we ascertain why these additional complaints have not been recorded. Paragraph 5.8 of the report is really just a snapshot of the compliments we've received, and I think an interesting read in terms of that. And paragraph 5.9 details the complaint actions and outcomes. So that's any improvements that we've put in place following on complaints that we've received. Ms. Whitted is with us today, so she will be able to answer any detailed questions that members may have in relation to the various aspects of the report.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Buchanan, and I'm delighted to see, I think it was going back, it was Councillor Bell that asked for the compliments to be included in the report, and that's excellent. 52 in July, 67 in August, and 54 in September. So that's it. That's absolutely excellent. Councillor Dorn, a question.
Yep, thank you. So my question relates to the kind of housing repair statistics that are related in this report. It shows there's obviously a large number of repairs that have been carried out in the last 6 months and how many have been carried out in October. But it's really difficult for us to assess how that compares to the amount of housing repairs that are waiting to be carried out. So I was wondering if that number could be included in future ones. I'm aware of I'm aware of one particularly pressing issue with a housing repair that is not being taken forward. So I'm just really conscious around those stats and us being aware of what we're looking at there, and also the fact that a number of them in the Appendix 1, the complaints when they're broken down, a number of those do relate to some housing issues as well, in terms of acceptable standards of maintenance, upgrade, and the timeliness of some of the repairs as well. So that's what I wanted to raise around that.
I'm not sure if Ms. Whittitt would be able to respond in terms of the detail of the housing issues. Yes, I wouldn't have thought so. It's more a housing matter. But what I'll do, Councillor Doran, is I'll speak with the relevant housing officer and see what we can do in terms of that, whether it be direct through themselves, because we only, of course, get the complaints that are given through the service and then come through in the complaints report. If it should be direct or can form part of something that we could bring at a future date.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to follow that up to thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor Bell.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I wanted to thank Elaine for including the compliments. I do think it works really well. And I've literally just had a compliment in today for our roads team. And I wondered if she would welcome us as councillors feeding in any compliments we get. I don't want to give you mega loads of work, Elaine, but would those help? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bell. Yes, we have a register, so we can include them within the register. If you have any compliments, just send them our way.
And I'll do that as well, Councillor Bell, because you get a few compliments, and it's good to feed them in, and it'll up the figures. Thank you. Councillor Beattie.
Hi, yeah, I'd just like to ask, how many complaints have actually ended up at the SPSO's office?
Elaine, would you like to respond to that? I see that there's actually a reference in the report to the SPSO's office, but we've got none at the moment that we're reporting back on in terms of a response. I think there was only a couple, but Elaine might have further details.
There are a few, and those numbers will be included in the so we include those that have been sent to the SPSO and the outcome in the annual report, which will come up in June next year, Councillor Beattie.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. Mine's is a comment rather than a question, if you're happy to take that.
Absolutely. There's nobody else up for questions, I don't think so. Yes, on you go, no problem at all.
Thank you. It's with relation to 5.8 for the compliments for the housing repairs. It's good to see that we are getting compliments in from the residents about the contractors. It shows that the standard of work is good and sometimes exceeding what was perhaps expected. So that's a positive, and it's good. It would be good to see, as Councillor Dorn had pointed out, how many repairs are outstanding as well. So I would also like to see that in the next report as well. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I'll sort that out if we can.
That can be done, Mrs. Whittle.
We will have a look and see, councillor.
Councillor Fotheringham, when did you ever call me that? Okay, agenda item number 11. We've got the 3 recommendations. Do we agree this report?
Agreed.
Okay, that's the end of the meeting, folks. Thank you all for your participation. The officers, Mrs. Maley, our clerk, thank you, and have a nice rest of the evening as pretty black outside now, but have a nice evening and thank you for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.